Okay, so we're live with the Node.js release meeting on the 29th of August 2019, and we'll be working from the agenda issue, which is in Node.js release 4.7.2. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen. And the first item on the agenda is in Node.js release, and it's the manual backports with compatibility patches. I think we've spoken about this before on release call.
I'm not sure if we spoke about it or not, but I think we came to a conclusion in the end, which is that we don't want to land all the patches like that, but we could ask people to open a manual backport by first cherry picking the original commit, and then adding the necessary change to it so it applies properly to the current release line. And that way the review is much easier, because then we can see what is actually changed, so it works on the release line, instead of having to manually check the differences between the original PR that landed or the original commit that landed and the manual backport. And while landing, we can then just squash those commits.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So Miles, I think you're also good with that?
Yeah, I think that, like, if it's part of the backporting process, but not something that affects the branches, I don't see a problem with it.
Mm-hmm. In that case, there's just one thing to do, I would say, and that's updating the guidelines for manual backports. That's why I just self-assign it. I'm good with writing something about that and opening a pull request in Node.js repo.
Yep, makes sense. The how to backport guide.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, I'll take a note on that one. Open. Oh, yep, makes sense. Probably you can take that off release agenda.
Yep.
Next one was release survey. And I think we talked quite in depth about this a couple of meetings ago. I can't remember what the next steps were.
So in the last time we spoke about it in depth, and that's why it's also filled out much more now. But especially for one point, we thought it would be good, especially to get some more feedback from Miles. So in this case, since you're here right now, it would be pretty cool if you could have a look at it again and just add some more comments if you think that's important, or change something.
Yeah, I think it was to do with manage runtimes. It's the Semver minor versus Semver patch. Or conversation in this one.
I'm not sure on what point it was in particular anymore. I think it's just good to read over it and add some more points if necessary, or change something.
Do you think we should do that today?
We can do it async.
Yep. Okay, so maybe I'll ping releases on this one, or LTS.
Yeah, and I'll go through and make some comments. What may help, do you think that it might make sense to take, can you scroll up for a second, Beth? We have kind of like some proposals here. What in particular, Ruben, is like the survey itself?
Right. So we did not yet write particular questions about it. First of all, it was to gather all the pros and cons pretty much for the different proposals that we brought up. I think there are 3 different proposals to change the current release handling. The reason for that is that we gathered a lot of concerns about the current way we are handling it. And we are trying to improve that. I think we are all aligned with that. And there's just some concerns from at least one person for all of these proposals. And therefore, it was meant to, first of all, check what concerns exist, what pros exist for all of these, and then try to get the actual questions about it afterwards together.
Mhm. Okay, so what kind of specific feedback are you looking for then?
So if you could just read through all of these things again, and then especially if you, I think there was at least one point where you had some concerns where at least no one else from the last meeting where we went through it in depth was sure what it was explicitly about anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess one request that I could make is, as Beth was showing there, I think that there's stuff, I'm just trying to bring it up on my own computer, that's included on this, such as the proposal to always create some for minor releases.
Yep.
Is that one even, like, I was under the impression that that one had been primarily tabled as a discussion.
Yeah, and that was at least for a while. We discussed about that at the last collaborator summit in more depth, and we thought that would be a good thing to do. But afterwards, there were a few concerns brought up, especially by you in this case. So we then I proposed to make like a survey because it's not completely clear, at least for me, what our users actually think a release, how stable a release is, what they are looking for, what are reasons for upgrading or not upgrading, what prevents them from switching to a new version. Do they feel safer updating to a patch release than to a minor release? And do they know the implications of that?
Mm-hmm. And I guess like, I'm not trying to be too harsh, but like, even if we did a survey, like I cannot imagine a world where I would agree to us doing only Semver minors on LTS ever. And I'm not just trying to harshly shut it down, and we should still do a survey and get this information, but like, from having worked in organizations, from having done releases, from having worked with like runtimes that we're doing at Google that we're putting out there, from having worked with multiple customers, talked to multiple enterprises, it just, like, the expectation about the fact that we even do minors in LTS is controversial.
Well, what we it's a little bit sad that you've not been at the meeting where we spoke about it in depth last time, because at least I think it was Sam Tagros and me, at least, who believe that I hope I say it correct, that we doubt that the Node.js release process is really comparable to, let's say, for example, the Linux kernel, where people would be more afraid of updating to a new version. And that's why it's good to have like all the patch releases. In Node.js, I personally am more afraid about a patch release than a minor release because of all the implications, how we create the release. And I honestly believe that most users do not know about these implications or the way we release things. So that's one point. And another point.
And this is, you are more afraid of a patch release on LTS than a minor?
Yeah.
I don't understand how that's possible. Can you dig into that a little bit more to help me understand?
Yeah, so when we do a patch release, instead of a Zenver minor, we create a lot more out of order commits. We have a lot more manual backports. And even if there is no manual backport needed and a commit lands cleanly afterwards, it might cause side effects that we did not anticipate because earlier commits are missing. And that's something I am personally more afraid about than actually breaking something with a new feature, because Zenver Miner should never break something officially. Of course, there can always be regressions, but that's possible with every commit, every code change that we do. So for me, there's a higher risk in doing in this manual work than trying to get all the commits in that we feel comfortable, because I mean normally we already have the period of time where we land something on the current release line until we feel comfortable that it should be backported to the LTS release line. So there's at least 1 month in between where people were also able to test the code. And normally things are brought up early if it is something urgent. And then we can still block that commit for the LTS release. We could also say, okay, there is a follow-up commit that has to land at the same time as this commit because otherwise it would break something. This has happened before as well. But I feel that the safety time in between is already enough and better than just doing the
Do you have specific instances that you can point to where we have breakages from putting things out of order that have caused problems in LTS that people have opened issues about? Or is this a gut feel that you have?
So I know there was one thing where we had a broken manual backport in an LTS release.
Mm-hmm. So but we're talking about like over the last 5 years of running this program with thousands of commits, one commit that's caused a problem.
Well, I know there's one recently where it caused problems, but on the other hand, like, is there any, do we know about any minors that cause problems?
The problems that minors cause are not as subtle as bugs. It is as simple as like, if a new feature gets introduced in LTS, a really great example is what's going on with serverless runtimes. So if you look at Amazon's Lambda, Lambda does not necessarily keep their version 8 runtime or version 10 runtime on the latest minor. They do keep up to date with the latest patch, but for them to update to a minor for their runtime is a fairly big deal and can take 6 months or so for them to go up to date. So what we've seen at Google, for example, where we have client libraries where we're using specific features, if you create Zenver minors where there's new features, you now have versions of a release line that are incompatible with older versions of the release line. And so all of a sudden packages will update to include those features and no longer be compatible with the runtime that's in production. So we've actually had tons of issues and actually had to like remove feature usage because the version of Node that's running inside of Lambda is not on the latest Zenver minor, and all the packages underneath, because the latest Zenver minor supports a feature, start breaking on that release line. This is the primary reason why most LTS programs don't introduce new features, because once something goes into LTS from a support perspective, you don't want things breaking at all. You want to be able to update even your dependencies that say they support that release line without having any problems like this. So part of the reason why we've been really slow, and in fact we were even slower with minors in the past, was that we didn't really care about having tons and tons of minors. And generally when we introduced the minors was because, they were things that would make compatibility better. But I've actually heard, like of more of these situations or in organizations like I was talking to a large enterprise recently who was trying to update between miners, and we updated the version of NPM between the miners, and NPM introduced a new bug, and they were not even able to update in between them. These are just, you know, some examples, but not a lot of shops end up updating their runtime. And the people who are managing the application, who can manage the node modules folder and update all the things there, are not even necessarily the same people who can make the decisions about the version of node that's running on the server. And so if it takes substantially longer for the version of node to move forward and the dependencies are changing underneath, this can make things very difficult and can stop people from being able to update their dependencies, or it can cause things to break underneath them in Semver patches without it even being clear. The rate of miners that we have has kept that somewhat constrained, and we've been somewhat constrained on the number of miners that we land. But if we start doing this actively, it's going to be an issue. The other thing too is, like, I really do think that it's like the claim here that everything would be in order. I don't see how that's a case, because we won't be landing every miner. We won't be landing every patch. It will never be close to the pristine other branch. This seems like a red herring to me.
So first of all, thanks for the feedback. This is especially the feedback that we were looking for last time. So I would kindly ask to fill out those details in the concerns of the release survey tab. In the issue. I mean, in this case, it's not like my personal opinion only. Like we spoke about it a couple of times and we thought about it. So thanks for bringing up these things again. One thing that I wonder about when you say that AWS, for example, has trouble updating to a minor release is, I would like to get to know the reasons for that. Because
it's purely time. Like, even at Google, it's like our teams put more time into supporting and updating minor releases than they will for patches, just period, across all runtimes. And it doesn't matter if we go and say, oh, well, Node does a special thing. They don't care. Patches mean something, minors mean something. Patches will have a shorter time frame at which they update internally. Minors will take longer.
Okay, I cannot judge on that because I'm not working on that process. So, but that's what I saw should be the release proposal. The release survey about to especially get feedback from companies and like AWS and more, and to get to know what they would like to have. So we, instead of having a survey like that, we could even like write a couple of emails to a few people maintaining these things and to ask their opinion what they believe would be the best proposal.
I'm trying to find the right way to say this and say it in a way that's not just like completely shutting this down. And I know that this needs to be a consensus thing. I don't have time to work on this, and I honestly do not believe that it is the right move. I won't stop you from doing this on working to try to do it, but I don't have time to support the research because I just do not believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we could try and piggyback the user feedback sessions that I know James and people are involved with, and whether we could get some questions into there just to get a bit of information from a variety of people, just for future reference. Or
like, Ruben, what I can do is, if you have something specific, I can give you a quick review before you want to send it out, and I'm happy to help introduce it to the people from Google. But, you know, I've made my points, I think, pretty clear on this call, and it will be extremely hard to get me to change the viewpoint that I have right now. I think, truthfully, that this specific proposal is fairly misguided, and I think that the premise is incorrect.
okay. Do you think you'd be able to add some of those concerns to this issue just as a comment, or just jot it down somewhere, Miles, so we've got them all in one place, and maybe others will jump in?
Can you check the issue that's referenced though? Because I feel like these are comments that I could have sworn. I'll make my objection more explicit and add some of the comments into the issue. Okay,
perfect. Is there anything else on this one to discuss, or should we do some more async and try and ping the releases, see anyone else has any thoughts, and then look at the next steps in the next meeting also?
I don't think there's much to go forward right now about it.
Okay.
So.
Sure. Next one on the agenda is the 12x release plan. What date are we? Are you still planning to do the release next Tuesday?
Yep.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we were going to bump it because we had 12.9.1, but I think it's all nicely lined up, ready for the first LTS in October now, every 2 weeks. So I guess we're sticking to this as best we can.
I can probably also do one more, depending on who else has time.
I don't think I'll get time for current because I've got a couple of LTS ones to do. But it seems like we're covered for the next week, so we should be okay. Last one is defining a word for all current releases. Actually, the package maintenance team are also considering this at the moment. So they've asked for feedback from the release team. And I think what they're trying to do is define a way your module could specify which versions of Node it supports or which versions of Node it will test against. And they've come up with some tags that they would set for their test runner or Travis that would run against each of the Node versions within these tags. And they've kind of just pinged to say, hey, what do you think about these names and how do they fit? I know we've had this issue on our backlog for a while about defining a word for all current releases. And I think they've hit the same issue, that there's no word for all supported releases. So at the moment, they've got abandoned. I wonder if I was trying to see the PR. I think it's just done in the issue.
So how would it exactly work? Abandon is like we explicitly give old versions and the abandoned one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wonder if it's defined in this PR. Ah, here we go.
Yeah. We don't have none, right? Do we have none?
I don't think so. I think. Okay, this is for a module owner to define which versions of Node they agree to support. And in this case, they're agreeing to support none. So it may just be a hobby project and that they're not going to define any commitment whatsoever.
Yeah.
All would be all active release lines. By that, I mean releases that are not end of life. LTS would be the same interpretation that we have. And they'd have active or releases not in maintenance. And all releases, both LTS and active.
Is LTS active and LTS latest ever not the same?
I don't think.
Yeah, it is. No, actually, should
Wouldn't
it?
LTS active here? Oh no, because maintenance is 8, right? So I think that depends on whether or not we switch the number of months for LTS. Because as it is right now, we do have an overlapping period of 6 months with 2 active LTS releases.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think the one that matches closest with the defining the word for all current releases is maintained, but I think we were going to go for supported. I think that was the consensus in this issue. Ish. But I think it was just on the agenda to get our feels on it. I think this is the only one that we need to make sure we sync up on because we don't currently have a word for this.
Yeah. We do use maintain partially, right?
I think if someone was to say this is support, this module works on all maintained versions of Node.js, I think I would reasonably at the moment assume that meant 8, 10 and current, so 12.
Mm. I think it's a good idea, the mapping. I think it's clearer than what we have. The question is if we can use it one-to-one for the releases.
Yeah. I don't understand the difference between all and maintained.
And I mean, one.
Yeah, I don't think there is a difference, and I don't know why 11 is on there, unless this is just from like when it was created.
Yeah, I think it's. I think probably at the time it was created, 11 was still.
And maybe 11 was in maintenance mode.
Yeah, I believe so.
But then why would 8? Why would 8 be in maintained? Because that's all. Yeah, I can't tell the difference between maintained and all either. That seems confusing.
Okay, so I can bring that back to.
And one more point: when we release something, we cannot call it like LTS latest. You know, we would have multiple releases that would be that, and I think that would be confusing, right?
I think LTS latest is just the most recent version, not like the most recent release. So when 12 becomes LTS, we'll have 12 and 10 and 8. 12 will always be LTS latest. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Yeah, but that's not the point that I meant. For me, it's more about what naming we use for our releases cannot be mapped one-to-one to these names because this is more like a tag for the releases.
Well, is the idea that these would be used for our releases, or that like I was imagining these are more like when you're doing an NVM install or when you're looking on the node downloads page or something, as they're like categories of how you think about the releases. They wouldn't be what we would like call the release when we do the release.
But I think that was what we originally spoke about. So it does not map one-to-one.
I think this is more on just terminology about how you would group like the various release lines. LTS is easy. That's just the ones that are in LTS mode, right? I think our gap is this one. And I think we should formalize on what we say for all releases that are still eligible to get updates, i.e. everything that's not end of life.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what we could do on this one is go through the terminology that we document in our README or Node.js nodes README and compare it with these. And see where there's additional over here that we don't have. I think the original action on defining a word for current releases was to PR the word that we would use for all non-end-of-life releases, and then use approvals on that PR to gain consensus. So I guess these two would be kind of satisfied together by that consensus anyway. Okay, I can take the action to PR this. I'll try and get to it as soon as possible. And we can talk on there which word we want to use for all non-end-of-life releases. And then when I go to the package maintenance meeting, whatever we agree on in release, I'll try to make sure they follow so it's not super confusing to users.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. And that was the last two items on the agenda. Is there anything else to discuss today? Nope. Okay.
Nothing that I can think of.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'll speak to you later.
Cool. See you around. Bye.
Bye.